Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. In a written statement on Monday, the Istanbul Governor's Office ordered Syrian refugees who were registered in other provinces of Turkey to leave Istanbul and return to their places of registration by August 20th.
The Istanbul Governor's Office has announced that Syrians who are registered in different cities but live in Istanbul have to return to the cities they are registered in until August 20th. In a TV program, Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu has said that more than 6,000 refugees were arrested in Istanbul, including Syrians. We have been carrying out an operation since July 12th. We have caught 6,122 people in Istanbul, including 2,600 Afghans and around 1,000 Syrians, Soylu said on TV. The minister also explained that unregistered Syrians would be sent back to refugee camps. However, he has denied the claims of deportation. Reports suggest that Syrian refugees in Istanbul have concerns of being deported to Syria as a result of unverified news and rumors. Earlier this week, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu suggested that Ankara will cancel the migrant readmission agreement with the European Union over the EU's unkept promise of visa-free travel for Turkish citizens. We will not wait at the EU's door. The readmission agreement and visa-free deal will be put into effect at the same time, Çavuşoğlu said. The agreement between Turkey and the EU in 2016 was a solution for the rapid influx of refugees into Europe. In return for financial aid and ease on visa restrictions, Turkey agreed to halt the influx of refugees and migrants into Europe. The agreement, however, was de facto suspended in the last months.
Joining us tonight to talk about the recent debate on the status of the Syrians living in Istanbul is Metin Çorabatır, who is the president of the Research Center on Asylum and Migration. Good evening, Mr. Çorabatır. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
So, as we've just heard in the previous news video, as per the order by the Istanbul Governor's Office on Monday, all Syrians that are registered to different provinces in Turkey will have to leave Istanbul by August 20th. And we hear from reports that Syrians in Istanbul are getting ready to stage a protest against this order. So why is this such a big problem among the Syrians living in Istanbul? Why do they not want to go back to their provinces of registration?
Actually, I guess these preparations for protest goes even before the governorate's order, and it is for general dissatisfaction or unhappiness, frustration of the Syrian refugees due to widespread and increasing number of amount of hate speech and negative attitudes against refugees. As far as the governorate's new statement is concerned, I think it is. There is, on the one hand, there is no new element in it. Since 2016, the government imposed restrictions on their freedom to travel within the country by saying that they should stay in the cities they registered. But in practice, many of these registered refugees, Syrian refugees, moved to big cities, mainly Istanbul, but not exclusively Istanbul, because the work opportunities is there. Istanbul already is the biggest, hosting the largest Syrian refugee population, which is 547,000 Syrians. So it was the implementation of the old order. Until now, it was maybe not properly controlled or tolerated to people come, because as I said, Istanbul is hosting the largest Syrian population, but in other countries, other cities in the border areas, although the numbers is slightly less than the total population, Syrian population in Istanbul, but proportionally, the amount of Syrians, the proportion of Syrians is much higher. And work opportunities, living conditions are not as good as in Istanbul. So many people since 2016 continue to come. The restrictions has some elements of encouraging them to stay in the cities of their residence, but calling them the Syrians, let me put it in that way, the Syrians, registered Syrians, can get the main important social services such as school, sending their kids to the schools, or benefiting the health services, free health services, or ability to apply for work permit in the cities where they are registered. However, for some, about 200,000 Syrians are estimated to live in Istanbul, although they're supposed to live in their cities of registration. Why this time such a administrative action took place? It's a matter of speculation, and what I am going to say is also my speculation. I think this election campaigns has shown that this issue has been very sensitive, and the opposition groups got the benefit by focusing this negative rhetoric against Syrians. And the party in the power, AKP, also felt that using this pro-refugee rhetoric works against its electoral successes. So I think this is a measure to show at least part of the public that the government will not allow them to live in Istanbul. This is one speculation. On the other hand, Istanbul is a huge mega city. Already 547,000 people, Syrians, are living. The government or the governorate may think that if such an action will not take place, then the population would go up and would bring more tensions between Syrians and host community, and also would create further difficulties in providing the services to the Istanbul people. So, for example, as I said, since they are not registered, the exact number is difficult to talk about, but the fair estimate is about 200,000 Syrians who supposed not to be in Istanbul, but actually in Istanbul. And then this is actually in comparison with the total Syrian refugee population in Turkey, which is 3.6 million, which seems to be not much. But if you compare it, the total number of refugees in many European countries, 200,000 refugees is still huge, and such a population, extra population, and if it continues to grow, then it would have more heavy burden on the city. This might be another concern, but I believe that the main motive behind this latest statements was of the governorate, and which was confirmed by the Minister of Interior, is I think because of the growing negative feelings against the Syrian population among Turkish population.
Mr. Çorabatır, just like you mentioned a minute ago, this is a very sensitive issue that has polarized the Turkish society in a rather cross-party way, in fact, and that's why we're trying to keep it cool here, and that's why we're trying to understand the technicalities related to the issue. So one other technicality that we need some light on, we need some light being shed on is the work permits, the working permits of Syrians. We hear that the government will also be closely inspecting the work permits of the Syrians living in Istanbul. Could you tell us how this works? So we know that Syrians here live with legal residence permits, but must they also have work permits in order to be legally occupied? Who has work permits and who doesn't?
Just the opposite. Only after 2017, government decided to subject to work in a registered way, regular way for Syrians, subject it to a work permit. And they issued a declaration. But this work permits process works very slowly, very difficult. Up until now, since 2017, this regulation was put into force. A total number by the end of last month, I think, 31 or 32,000 people, Syrians, who were able to get a work permit, which is a very difficult process. Turkey is a state party to 1951 Geneva Conventions related to the status of refugees, but maintains a geographical limitation. Therefore, right to work is not recognized for non-European refugees, which includes Syrians as well. So this work permit issue, only small portion of the population, Syrian population, benefits. There are a lot of criteria. First of all, they have to find employer who, on behalf of the refugee, should apply for work permit. It takes sometimes 4 months to get a permit. So it is not practical way to work in a regular way, in a formal job market. So the majority of Syrian refugees in all cities work unregistered way, informal way. So one of the policy element of the government was to encourage, as I said before, the Syrians to stay in the cities, and one tool to encourage them was that they could only apply for formal employment job permission, work permission in the cities they are registered. So about this 200,000 estimated Syrian refugees living in Istanbul, I don't know what is the proportion of those who are at the age of work or as a child work, or actually who are actually working in Istanbul to this total extra population. But in any case, the majority of more than 500,000 Syrian refugees also work in Istanbul in an unregistered informal market. So because Istanbul is the heart of Turkish economy, there are much more work opportunities. So these are informal opportunities, but still, in order to support their families, their life, to make their presence sustainable, they work in this way, not the registered way, and getting work permits, as I said, is very difficult for them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Çorabatır, for informing us very extensively on the formal and legal status of the Syrians in Istanbul right now and the debates around them. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
We were joined by Metin Çorabatır, and he informed us about the details of the recent debates on Syrians living in Istanbul and Turkey, and now we'll continue with our next news video. The U.S. Special Envoy for Syria, James Jeffrey, arrived in Ankara on Monday for a 2-day visit. Jeffrey met with Defense Minister Hulusi Akar to discuss the establishment of a safe zone in Syria, along with the recent developments in the region.
Foreign Minister Mevlut to accelerated and concrete progress on the Manbij roadmap, adding that Jeffrey had forthright, positive and productive talks during his visit. There was an overall discussion on Syria and specifically for the Northeast. Both sides committed to accelerated and concrete progress on the Manbij roadmap and discussed detailed proposals to enhance Turkey's security along the Turkish border in northeast Syria, the U.S. Embassy said in the statement.
And joining us now to talk about Turkey's perception in the United States is Bülent Yavuz, who is a US-based strategic marketing expert and a senior advisor at the Stagwell Group. Dr. Yavuz has extensive experience on strategic consultancy, public relations, and political campaigns. Good evening, Dr. Yavuz. Good to have you on This Week in Turkey.
Nice to have you. Good evening.
So what could you tell us about how Turkey, both as a country and a government, is perceived in the US? How would you rate the public perception of Turkey in the United States?
Okay, so when voters or the influencers in the United States look at a country from a public perception perspective, many of the times that international affairs dictate their perception. And Turkey is an example of that. And because of all the controversies that are happening between the United States and Turkey in recent years, the overall view is net negative. However, situation is quite dynamic, and there is definitely areas of improvement laying ahead for Turkey, and also increased awareness of Turkey by U.S. public is growing on a daily basis. So it's a very dynamic situation, but overall I would say it's net negative.
And what would you say about the elites and how Turkey is perceived among the U.S. elites?
Okay, so before answering that question, I have to really emphasize why the U.S. elites are important in establishing public perception in the United States. Basically what happens is that the elites who are really defined by professionals who have a certain income level, usually it's 100,000 annual basis on a family size and more, educated, and also interested in political affairs and international affairs. Those groups of people are usually pocketed in Northeast and East Coast in general, such as in New York, Washington, D.C., Boston, Philadelphia, etc., in that area, as well as in the West Coast around Los Angeles and San Francisco, and plus Chicago and Houston and a few other places. So those are the elites that we're talking about. Why are elites important? Because the elites usually define the opinion for public initially. And through the elites, the major media and press talk about the issues that shape the public perception. So in a way, it trickles down to the general public in time, and usually the general public takes these views and run with it in longer term. Now, having said all these things, what I just described to you is what has been the classic way in the United States. But with the advent of social media increased in recent years, especially in the last decades, many of the surprises that we've seen in political arena contradicted what the model that I just described. So now the individuals do have their own opinions influenced through their interactions on social media, and it's a much more complex process. So the entire thing is becoming much more digital and complex and not easy to predict. So that's with that background, a long background, maybe then I can refer to your question that it is quite important to establish the links through channels to influence the elites, and in particular the DC elites. The DC elites stand out even more importance for a country like Turkey, because individuals that are described as DC elites are most of the time they work in government or government-related organizations, and therefore they are the very individuals that shape and form the policies that goes around in the country. So you can call them as part of the greater establishment in the United States, and that's what it makes them very, very important.
Dr. Yavuz, to what extent do you think the events in international politics control and shape public opinion in the United States, both in the United States and in general?
Well, I can, yeah, it's a good question. It depends on the country. So if the country, let's take, you know, a country such as United Kingdom as an extreme example. So from the public perception perspective in the United States, the political events or the international events have very little or if any strong contribution to the public perceptions, because the relationship between United Kingdom, the people of the United Kingdom and people of the United States are quite intricate and interlinked with each other, obviously. So that's an extreme example. But when you come to countries like Turkey, where the relationship between the two countries are limited in certain areas, in this case, definitely defense stands up as the key number-one issue. The opinions traditionally by the public perception is dominated by the events in this area. Now, having said that, again, the situation is quite dynamic, and Turkey's recognition in the United States among general public is no longer an obscure thing anymore. Turkey is a very well recognized and followed country compared to what it was, you know, let's say 15 to 20 years ago. So with that in mind, it becomes extremely important for Turkey to look at avenues and areas where they can shape the country can shape their public perception through the outside means of international politics, especially defense-related issues. So that's an opportunity and a challenge for Turks, especially the Turks who live in the United States, as well as the government institutions, etc.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the perception of Turkey right now, Dr. Yavuz. We're already talking about it, but let's go back to it in detail right now. As you know, the country's been going through quite an eventful period lately, especially with the election rerun, the municipal election rerun in Istanbul, which resulted in the first serious defeat for President Erdogan in almost 17 years. Does this translate to an increased coverage of Turkey in the U.S. news? And is this good or bad? What do you think?
Definitely, it increased the coverage because this is such an eventful happening for a number of reasons. First of all, the perception. Let me go back again. The public perception, the DC elites perception, or the voters' perception, no matter where you look at it. Overall perception for Turkey is that although the elections are practiced in a democratic way in Turkey, the public does not consider Turkey as a true democratic nation. So we need to understand the distinction. So only one in five consider maybe among the voters as Turkey as a true democracy. So from that perspective, the cancellation of the first election actually did fit to that public perception's mind. But what happened afterwards is, and to the favor of Turkey, and also to the favor of President Erdogan, that the repeat election and recognition of these results are actually both positive events for Turkey and for Mr. Erdogan as well, because at the end of the day, the administration, the government in Turkey recognized the results and moved on. So that's a very, very important distinction, and tells the public that Turkey actually is a more democratic country than what we think, is. It's not, quote unquote, a typical Middle Eastern country where rulers dictate and nothing else matters, but maybe a more Western democracy, so that people could decide their fate in elections, such how we saw it in Istanbul rerun. So it's a complex answer to that.
Mm-hmm. Let's try to end on a constructive note, Dr. Yavuz. You're an expert in the field, so what, in your opinion, should Turkey do in the global PR arena to improve its public perception and image?
Okay. Well, I would say a few things, but one of the things that I wanted to emphasize on a little bit of a concerning note is that it's the very first time that I see by general public, voters in particular in the United States, now consider Turkey as an enemy country. This is a very, very important event. It's the very first time that a major poll, such as what we see in the Harvard-Harris poll, it is a major poll that it is done on a monthly basis, describe Turkey as the fifth in the enemy list, going after, ranking after Iran, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia. So this is something that Turkey should be really concerning. On the flip side, Pew Center has made a lot of studies. The people of Turkey, whether that it is the issues in Syria or in Middle East or elsewhere, take the conversation as much as possible out of that context and put it into the daily life of the people and show Turks and Turkey from that perspective. And institutions like Turkish Airlines are extremely important, and they've done a phenomenally great job in the last 15 years to improve the perception of Turkey. A differentiator of Turkey is the city of Istanbul. Now, Istanbul is a magnificent city. It's unequal to many of the places on earth. And Americans are especially extremely influenced and impressed when they visit Istanbul. It becomes a transformation in their outlook to the country. So the governors of Istanbul, its new mayor, and whoever else is involved in running the city has to realize that this is an additional area of opportunity to contribute to the country, the public perception of Turkey through Istanbul.
Dr. Yavuz, thank you very much for your insights and comments and for being with us tonight.
I thank you for having me, and have a great evening for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Tonight we were joined by Dr. Bülent Yavuz from the Stagwell Group, who commented on Turkey's perception among the US elites and also the US public. And now we'll continue with our next news video. Mehmet Hakan Atilla, the former Deputy Director General of the state-owned Halkbank, was released from prison in the US last week after more than 1 year in jail for evading US sanctions on Iran.
The Deputy Director General of Turkish state lender Halkbank, Hakan Atilla, was convicted in the United States for plotting to help Iran evade US sanctions on Iranian oil proceeds. He was arrested in March 2017 and sentenced to 32 months in prison. However, Atilla was released early on July 19th on ground of good behavior. After his release, Hakan Atilla arrived in Istanbul on July 25th. He was welcomed by Turkey's Treasury Secretary Berat Albayrak in the Istanbul airport. Prior to Hakan Atilla, Iranian gold trader Reza Zarrab was also arrested in 2016 in the US for helping to evade the sanctions on Iran. Zarrab, however, cooperated with prosecutors and gave a testimony against Atilla. After Attila's conviction, Turkey called the verdict a conspiracy aimed at complicating Turkey's internal politics and intervening in Turkey's internal affairs. Hakan Atilla convinced the court that he had only played a minor role in the scheme and that he acted as an executor of instructions by Halkbank's Director General.
The Iraqi Kurdish Regional Government, KRG, announced on Saturday that a man suspected of killing a Turkish consulate employee in an armed attack in Erbil has been detained.
A terrorist has been detained for killing a Turkish consulate employee in Iraq in an armed attack last week, the Iraqi Kurdish Regional Government said on Saturday. According to a written statement by the Security Directorate of Erbil city, where the attack took place, the alleged attacker Mazlum Dağ, who was identified 2 days ago, has been detained by security forces. The statement also said that search efforts are ongoing for others involved in the attack. On July 17th, Osman Köse, who was serving at Turkey's Consulate General in Erbil, was killed in an armed attack at a restaurant. Apart from Köse, 2 Iraqi nationals sitting at the next table were also killed.
Turkey's central bank cut its key interest rate by 425 basis points to 19.75% on Thursday.
The Central Bank of Turkey slashed its policy rate by 425 basis points to 19.75% from 24% yesterday. This marked the first reduction in the interest rate since February 2015. The Turkish lira slumped more than 1% against the US dollar to trade at 5.73 immediately after the central bank announced the rate decision. Recently released data indicate a moderate recovery in the economic activity, the central bank said in a statement. Former Governor Murat Çetinkaya was dismissed from his post early on July 6th via a presidential decree to be replaced by his deputy governor Uysal. Commenting on the removal of Çetinkaya, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said on July 9th that the former governor's decisions had burdensome costs, which were beyond endurance, and thus a change was needed.
After interviewing former Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu on his show, radio host Yavuz Oğhan's program was cancelled by Radio Sputnik.
İtirazlarınız var.
Radio host Yavuz Oğhan's program was cancelled by Radio Sputnik a few days after he interviewed former Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu on YouTube. Oğhan announced his sacking on Twitter, saying, "No good deed goes unpunished in Turkey. We interviewed Davutoğlu yesterday. Our program was cancelled today, despite the fact that we did it on our private YouTube channel." Oğhan interviewed Davutoğlu on Thursday, along with his co-hosts, journalist Akif Beki and İsmail Saymaz. During the interview, the former prime minister maintained his critical stance towards the government and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, reaffirming his intention to establish a new political party to take on Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.